Yeah, I mean, I do think that Hollywood loses something if it loses that sense of community, right? Like, Hollywood is actually a pretty small-time industry with a lot of people who make a lot of money.
Welcome to Ankler Agenda and Happy New Year. It's Thursday, January 8th, and I'm Elaine Low, author of the series Business Newsletter, and I'm here with Sean McNulty, who writes the Daily Wake Up newsletter.
Greetings from New York.
And Natalie Jarvey, who writes our Creator Economy newsletter. Like and subscribe.
Hello.
Congrats to all of you who survived till and through 25 and are still hustling. The Ankler himself, Richard Rushfield, is back with a new Rushfield's Rant at the end of the show, where he's going to break down some of the key fronts that he believes are either going to make or break Hollywood in 2026. It's definitely been a tough few years for the industry, and it's no surprise that people are leaving Los Angeles. But we're going to get into just how bad is it, and also how resilient is this town. Separately, the Golden Globes are this Sunday, so make sure you're subscribed to Prestige Junkie After Party to watch along Sunday night with Katie Rich and Chris Rosen starting at 5 p.m. Pacific. We're also rolling out, drumroll please, a grand experiment this year, a look at the Hollywood speculation markets that involves putting your money where your mouth is as we explore this multi-billion-dollar business. It's a segment we're calling Betting on Hollywood, in which we're going to use $1,000 of the Ankler's own money in the prediction markets. But first, briefly, the latest in the Warner Brothers, Paramount, Netflix love triangle, where Warner Brothers has once again rejected another offer from Paramount. Sean, we kind of saw this coming, right?
I wouldn't say I was shocked by this. No, we need like a Valentine's Day deadline here. I think at some point for one of these like deal points, like just to really keep it thematic, because it's that person holding the dozen roses every time the door and having the door slam in their face. Like, pick your analogy of what you imagine.
You want David Ellison to be heartbroken on Valentine's Day, Sean?
No, I don't. Yeah, I guess I guess it would be Larry Ellison who's heartbroken. I don't know. Pick your scenario there, but yeah, not a real big, this is again the same $30 share offer. This had the Larry Ellison personal guarantee that he's good for the money aspect of it that happened before the new year. The only interesting main caveats here, again, this is a response, kind of WBD telling their shareholders what they think versus say a message to Peace Guy directly. But the debt was a big aspect of their letter statement, whatever you want to call it today, which is true. I mean, the combined Warner Mount company would have $87 billion in gross debt, according to WBD, which, if you want just for some perspective,
it's like the GDP of a small country.
I mean, yeah, just, because back when WBD was formed back in 2022, that was the big topic, right, Elaine? It was like, oh my God, this crushing debt. And that was, quote unquote, only $49 billion. So,
which then they brought down to something like 37 bill at some point.
In a gross debt way. Yeah, no, but only through all the stuff that we've talked about in this podcast. So it's massive cutting the bone, synergies, whatever you want, cost savings, and Paramount has those planned, and they've already promised $6 billion. I've heard $9 billion was put out, I think, by Warner Brothers a little while back. So that's how they're going to get that down. But just in terms of a gross number, Elaine, that's just a boggling number. So they cited that as a concern, and then also some math in the breakup fee, where paying back Netflix and some other aspects of the deal, they're like, well, there's not going to be a lot of cash left over from this. So essentially, TLDR, Elaine, we want more money, and whether that's more in breakup fee or more in a higher per share offer.
But they're not saying never, right? They're just saying the price wasn't high enough.
I mean, yeah, we want more money, right, Natalie?
I mean, that's the big question, right, Sean? Is this over, or are we going to see Paramount continue to come back and try again and again? What are we in for here?
It's a dance. It's a courtship, whatever you want to call it. And Paramount has said this is not their last and best final offer. And but they're just not coming back with more cash yet. This has been going on since the first week of December, and we're still kind of at the same spot. And there's also the other thing, which I brought down the wake up this morning, but The Versant is now a public company. Welcome to the world, Versant. Hold for applause, everybody. No idea? Okay, anyway. Wall Street has been kind of hammering this stock down 13% on day one, down 10% day two. I think, let me see where we're at here. We were down about 4% this morning, something like that. So, that's the crux of Peace Guy's argument, is that we are paying you for these cable networks, which Wall Street, they're telling them that Wall Street will not value very highly. So Versant being a test case, not an exact comp, but pretty close. So I think Paramount may be waiting that out a little bit. So to answer your question, Natalie, this is definitely not, over at this point, I would say.
All right, let's give them that Valentine's Day deadline then, and try to
I
wrap
like this
it up here.
thematically. Yeah, I think it's the Friday the 13th as well. I think is the Valentine's Day this year.
That works out well.
So a lot of converging factors. With Wuthering Heights going on that day, which we're all going to go see together at the theater. So it'll be very nice.
I will be there on Friday, opening night. So come on over to LA, Sean.
Field trip. Yeah, we can
it.
combine a WBD shared deal talk and Wuthering Heights talk in the same day. It'd be pretty exciting.
Thematically, it's a whole no means no kind of day. Okay. All right. All right. Well, maybe you've heard of sites like Kalshi and Polymarket and FanDuel. And if you aren't familiar, they're predictions markets where you can bet on just about anything. And they're expected to be $1 trillion market, a huge part of the economy. They function similarly to stock exchanges, and they're regulated on a federal level by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And while there are gambling sites and online sports books that aren't legal in all 50 states, predictions markets essentially function as a bit of a legal workaround where you can gamble without really calling it gambling. It doesn't hurt that Donald Trump Jr. is a strategic advisor to Kalshi and has a stake in Polymarket. So what does this have to do with the entertainment business? Well, MoviePass, the movie theater subscription service that went bust some years ago, is entering the predictions business. It has a new hybrid predictions market / fantasy league gaming company called Mogul. And MoviePass CEO Stacey Spikes told our own Matthew Frank that Mogul intends to be the first real hub for entertainment speculation. Matthew spoke to Spikes for a great story that's now live on the site, and it got us thinking. Maybe Matthew should get more into these markets? What would happen if we made our own bets on the business in the prediction markets? How big of an audience is there for betting on Golden Globes winners or Disney earnings calls? What are some of the ethical issues that can arise if you work in Hollywood and use these sites? So in a new recurring segment we're calling Betting on Hollywood, Matthew is going to take $1,000 of real money from the Ankler and see what happens over the course of the year. Matthew, welcome back.
Thank you. I should emphasize that somehow this was not my idea. But yes, I'm very excited to be here and be spending the Ankler's money.
You have the greatest gig here, Matthew. You got to go cross country and visit 58 movie theaters across 20-some states last year, and you're kicking off the year by taking $1,000 of the Ankler's money and betting on predictions markets.
They say dream jobs don't exist, but I guess I'm proof to the contrary.
Okay, so let's start off by talking about how these work.
Yeah, so as you pointed out, basically prediction markets are they're like a sports book, except instead of betting against the house, you're betting against other people on the other sides of bets. So it's a bit more of a closed loop that way. The ethical, legal ramifications they're a little bit better. But, so if you're betting on the Oscars, if you're saying, I want Timothée Chalamet to win, you're betting against the people who are saying, no, I don't think he'll win. So that's how it works. Yeah, but for our purposes, I guess the short of it is you can bet, and if you're right, make money on things going on in Hollywood.
Thank you, Matthew, for explaining that, because I dabble in some fantasy football. I got second in my league this year, but I've never dabbled in the world of gambling. So this is a whole new world for me.
Yeah, no, it's you should stay away. You should sit out these segments. It's not. But the prediction market space is projected to be long term, as Stacey Spikes, the CEO of MoviePass and now Mogul, has pointed out. It's supposed to be this $1 trillion space. So, I mean, his logic is if you can get a small part of that, it's worthwhile. And the movie and entertainment space is a small part of that because it's still a lot of sports, especially on Kalshi and Polymarket and these, big sites. But entertainment is still a reasonably big sliver of that.
Sean, where did these originate from? I know you've written a little bit about these markets before. Like, is it mostly sports betting? Where did this come from?
Politics was the big part of it. The Trump campaign kind of famously launched this, or the Trump election, I should say. So that was where all the money went. And, Don Jr. became Matthew advisor to Kalshi. He's kind of got a role at both of the two biggest players in this field. The UFC set a huge deal with Polymarket again. So there's kind of sports leagues getting involved in this, Elaine. And then it evolved into sports really huge in 2025. And that's where kind of the $1 trillion valuations in money market. It's not on politics betting, although that will resurge probably in midterm elections and presidential elections. It's really the sports aspect. Matthew, I mean, one of them is like, 90% or something like that is sports action or something? What's the...
Yeah, I think that's the Kalshi stat. It's like 90% of
it's a sports, predictions market service, Elaine.
And you can bet, or should I say make predictions, if that's the term they want to use, on like all sorts of different wild, weird things, right? Like what's like an earnings call prediction that you could make, Matthew?
So the earnings calls ones are fun because you can bet on the sub counts, but you can also bet on the mentions, which are like, will they say the word gaming or will they say the word subscriber? And you can, put money on that. And there's ones that are a little bit closer to even, ones that are long shots, ones that are favorites. So you can watch the earnings call with some real stake in the stupidest possible version of it.
I think I do really good with that. I'd like to do some bets on when Reed Hastings was wearing his sweaters,
His BoJack Horseman sweater or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the legality and the ethics of this. So like, let's say you run, a film studio in LA. You could bet on your own properties doing well or not?
So it's kind of tricky. When I talked in last January to the CEO of Kalshi, this guy, Tarek Mansour, he said that basically anything that's insider trading is not allowed on his platform. But, the guardrails for that are tricky. If you look on the Rotten Tomatoes markets where you can bet on Rotten Tomatoes scores, the only people who can't bet on it, per their rules, are Rotten Tomatoes critics. So if you're for example, a film studio exec who knows that your movie is not very good,
you can bet against it.
There's nothing in there that says that you can't bet it, and it's not like what the Rotten Tomatoes critics are going to say. You just know the quality of your own movie, but from your subjective opinion.
Again, these things aren't. These are not SEC, monitored businesses, Elaine. So again, these are at the company's discretion, essentially, to monitor this stuff. And these are not laws. These are not, official things in the world like SEC, Natalie. Yeah. So it's not exactly the same thing. There's
also not enough money on the White Lotus casting markets for it to be a significant enough issue. But there are no restrictions. So if you know the casting of it, you can go to those markets and bet on them, I suppose.
Well, wait, but that is a thing that exists, like White Lotus casting.
That does exist, yeah.
Anyone good odds for this upcoming season, Matthew?
Jodie Comer at 32 cents a share. So if you bet no at 75, if you want to bet $100, you could win $129. So $29 profit if you know she's not going to be cast. And then there's a bunch of other people with shockingly high odds if you want to just take no on everyone. But
yeah,
I'd love to see Jodie Comer in the next season. I don't think I'd want to bet no on that one.
No, fair. Well, it's a hedge. It's an emotional hedge.
Yeah, but if you're Jodie Comer's agent, she's definitely not doing that show. You could make a nice little chunk, and you can make $29 if you bet $100 or $290 if you bet $1,000.
Which is what's fascinating about this whole market, right? Like, it's all technically legal, but you really get into some ethically murky waters here.
Yeah. No, it's incredibly tricky, and there has been no outsized, scandal yet. But, the more that these things grow, the more that they exist, the more that there's they get into weird minutia, like, what the hosts of award show will say during their monologues, all this type of stuff. You will inevitably have someone who says, hey, I can stand to make $1,000 here just by knowing what I know. So,
interesting. Well, this is something that we're going to be tracking throughout the year, especially as it pertains to the entertainment business. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us. We will see you in the coming weeks, and we'll see how some of those predictions pan out.
Yep. Excited to, I'll let you guys know next week how the Globes bets turn out.
Okay, now on to a more sobering topic. It's been 1 year since the start of the LA fires that ravaged the Palisades and Altadena, which destroyed more than 16,000 buildings and took 31 lives. It's a grim anniversary, and in so many ways, this city still has a long way to go in recovering from it. According to local reports, more than 70% of people displaced by the fires still haven't been able to return to their homes. You combine that with the aftermath of the pandemic, the writers and actors strikes in 2023, productions leaving LA, and still kind of a lackluster TV market. And that means it's been challenging for many of the creatives who call this place home. To get into some of the numbers, the unemployment rate for all of LA as a city is at 5.9%. It's a little higher than the statewide rates and 28% higher than the national unemployment rate. And about 28,000 people have left LA County over the past year, according to the California Department of Finance. Now, that is less than 0.3% of the 10 million people who live in the county. But it was apparently still enough to help make LA the #1 city that people are moving out of for another year in a row, according to data from Pod's moving company. So, guys, just how bad are these numbers in context?
Los Angeles clearly had a really hard 2025. So it's not surprising that some people made the choice to leave this city.
The LA fires, the pandemic, some of these things, even the strikes, are once in a lifetime, once in a generation type activities or type events. But then you look at also, some of the other factors like the high cost of living. And that's something that's just perennially existent in LA. Like LA has always had a high cost of living, too. And, I do feel like every 6 months, you see some sort of think piece of like, I'm leaving LA, or conversely, I'm leaving New York, right? Like when you talk about another city with a high cost of living. So like there are some elements of this that are not new at all.
No, I mean, New York, we've been doing it since, COVID was a big story. We've been having this story in New York, not written by LA publications, but written by New York publications, for 6 years now. And pick your thing. Was it COVID? Was it inflation? Is it, the Wall Street, getting upset about taxes? Or now we have a new mayor in town, which a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on, a lot of pieces on that in November and December this year about people leaving because of, they're fearing higher taxation on billionaires and millionaires, whatever might happen, all policies that aren't in place yet. But New York is still here. A lot of people those pieces that were saying everybody's leaving for Miami, well, a lot of those people, the pieces were written like, oh, they're coming back now. So this is always a moving situation, a fluid situation. But New York's been dealing with this headline for a good 6 years now, for sure.
If you look statewide at all of California, and there are a lot of different data sources here, but generally it has been a trend of people leaving the state, not just Los Angeles. Though I will note one report from last year that showed that there was actually an uptick in population last year, a very small one, and that was for the third consecutive year.
Yeah, and the growing cities are all, a lot of pieces about this are not on the coast. They're in the Midwest. And there's a big thing in the Wall Street Journal just last week about Wisconsin is the new hotbed of, people moving there. You want to look at their vaccination rates, maybe a different story for your kids. That's a different map that people did not mention that story. So there's different kinds of lifestyle factors that people think about. And then you get there and then like, oh, I didn't realize that this was the case. I was just looking at money. And it's like, well, there's things like climate, weather. Do you like being near the ocean? Do you not so there's other things that factor into this kind of stuff. But I think the bigger thing is probably you can do more jobs remotely, certainly. But conversely, we've had Paramount now back. This is their first week. And congratulations to all our Paramount listeners. Now 5 days a week back in the office, or at least here in New York City. Amazon has certainly done this. A lot of companies are now back to 5 days a week in the 2026 calendar. So it's a lot of, it's these fluctuating moving parts of land where it goes this way and then it goes this way. But for LA, it seems like more of a specific problem, perhaps.
Sure. And we haven't talked about the fact that there's been a real loss of production in Los Angeles. So people who used to be able to build their lives here have had to move elsewhere to follow production, to places like New York or Atlanta where they can find jobs.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting to note the political element to this. We talked a little bit about the ICE raids, but there's an LA Times story that cites those Department of Finance numbers that also interestingly notes that the Trump administration's termination of humanitarian migration programs has also had an impact on the population. So a lot of that isn't necessarily just people are leaving LA, but, there is less of a migration into the city and into the county. But, you know, going back to the idea of the how it's been impacting the creative community, I mean, Hollywood has especially been feeling it, right? Like this was further exemplified this week by a story in New York Magazine that's been making the rounds by former The Goldbergs TV writer Lauren Bands, who observes that all of her friends are leaving LA. And yes, like this is sort of a piece that we see perennially as well. But I do wonder how much worse do we think it'll get in 2026? You know, we have labor negotiations coming up. The WGA, SAG are about to start their talks. You know, what happens to the business if there's another strike? What are the odds of another strike?
Yeah, you know, I'm always hesitant to give too much weight to a story that reflects one very specific worldview and only talks to kind of people within that worldview. This was a story written by a TV writer, like you mentioned, talking to a lot of TV writers. She does mention some of these stats that we've been talking about as well. But, you know, it's certainly not reflective of everyone's experience. There are many people staying here, though, of course, yes, we are definitely seeing those wider trends of overall, leaving the city. To your question about what happens next, I mean, I think this is going to be a really pivotal year for Hollywood. You mentioned the guild negotiations. Certainly, we're all waiting to see what happens with Warner Brothers. I bet a lot of people are kind of feeling things out this year.
I mean, it's obviously probably the dominant narrative, at least the first half of this year. The first deadlines, for the deals are May 1st, I think, is the WGA. So we'll see if and SAG is up first in negotiating this time, not the DGA, which that negotiation begins in about a month, or at least the talks, are first starting there. So we'll get some inclination about that, Elaine, but it's going to dominate the first half of the year for sure in this town.
Yeah, I think there's the prevailing thought, though, that this town really can't survive another strike just 3 years after the last one. To your point, Natalie, about, that story coming from a very particular worldview, I do think it also is worth shouting out all the people who have managed to stay here and have shown resilience and have built their homes out here. And, writing and acting, those are certain kinds of jobs that you can, still technically kind of do remotely, or you can just fly into town when you need to. But a lot of these production jobs on the ground, for what production is left here, at least, I live in the Valley, and so many of my kids' friends' parents are, lighting technicians or set designers or people who work on these sets. And, we all live fairly modest lifestyles and still sort of manage to build a home here and to keep that. So I think it's worth saying that, LA is a city of resilience when it comes to the business.
Sure. And, I know many people who lost their homes last year or who dealt with other challenges work-wise, who in response really kind of doubled down on their love for this city and really committed to their community and to rebuilding their community. And that's really hopeful and beautiful too.
And I want to say, I also put out the survey at the end of last year asking people, hey, are you thinking about leaving? Because, I've heard from plenty of people who have. And I was really surprised by some of the responses that came in. There were some people who said that they've already moved, but, there are others who have just chosen to stay. Although I will say, even those who have stuck it out in LA so far, there are some folks who are still thinking of moving. One director told me that they can't afford LA, and any work that they've had this past year has actually been out of town anyway. There was a research executive at a pretty well-known production company that says that, quote, the industry is democratizing across the nation and LA is unaffordable for young families. And then I talked to another talent manager who moved to Nashville and said that the greater issue really was just being pushed further and further away from colleagues and industry contacts in the sprawl of LA, which certainly tracks, right? Like if you're an assistant at an agency, you work at CAA, you're not living in Century City. Like you're living somewhere up in the Valley or out in San Gabriel.
Well, and I will point to creators who I spent a lot of time writing about and talking to. There was a kind of common occurrence a few years ago that creators would get famous wherever they lived, and then move to Los Angeles because that's where the opportunities were. Now we're seeing a lot more creators choose to build companies and invest in the place that they already live. So we're now seeing hubs in Texas and Georgia and other places where they can continue to do their work and really attract more creatives to where they are and create a new kind of thriving hub for, content creation in a new place.
Yeah, and there's probably also just a generational thing to consider here where, you both, Elaine, you're 17 years in LA? How long have you been in LA for?
I've been in LA since 2008. It's my 17th, well, I guess going into 18th year here now.
All right, and Natalie, you've been in LA for how long?
I got you beat. I moved to LA for college in 2006.
Okay,
boy.
so if you've set roots in a city for that long, you're more inclined to stay there. Your life is there. Your kids are there. There are people who are married. You don't just get to leave because your job's not going that well. Maybe your spouse is doing well who does not work in entertainment, things like that. But if you came in the boom, Elaine, of Hollywood, and it's a streaming boom, I should say, of the late 2017, 2016, you've been here 8 years. Maybe you were 25 at that point. Maybe you're mid 30s, and I'm not from here. I don't have the kind of roots that both of you have. So there's that contingent of employment, which we talked about many times in this podcast, that has gone away. And if a lot of that contingent is saying we're leaving, it gets to become a little louder in the, echo chamber. But in the reality, as you both say, is a lot of people doubling down on their hometown.
I will say though, Sean, you talk about people being able to, build a life here with a spouse. It used to be that if you lost your job, you might be able to stick it out in LA because your spouse had a really great job. And that is getting harder as the cost of living increases.
That money's harder to stretch. Yeah, no, it's true.
But, I do think it is also worth mentioning that the major TV and film studios are still largely based here. I know there's a lot of production facilities being built out in New Jersey. There are, offices in New York, obviously, but the major TV and film studio executives are here. And I'm wondering if this is where they live and work, and these are the studios and production companies that they're running. What are they doing to keep more people in LA? Like, is this something that their businesses should prioritize? I know the actual production has been moving outside of LA, but there's something to be said for still having offices here if you're a film exec who wants to live and work in LA. I also wonder, entertainment is such a global business now, but what happens when we lose the physical representation of Hollywood?
Yeah, I do think that Hollywood loses something if it loses that sense of community, right? Like Hollywood is actually a pretty small-time industry with a lot of people who make a lot of money, but it is a community, and that changes if it becomes more global, as it has been becoming for a while now. That, I hope, means that more voices can come in and more stories can be told, but it does change the makeup of what's happening in this town.
All right. Any of our viewers and listeners out there, do you have a strong take on this? Email us at podcasts@theankler.com. I'm at Elaine@theankler.com. You know who else has a strong take on just about everything? Richard Rushfield. So here's another Rushfield's rant. All right, we're back with the first Rushfield's rant of the new year. Happy New Year, Richard.
Happy New Year to you, Elaine.
Your first column out of the gate. I think, could we say it's optimistic in a way? It's about Hollywood's last stand in 2026.
Yeah, I don't want to get crazy and start running feel good pieces here, but I leave open the possibility that doom is not written in stone yet, and perhaps it just looks darkest before the dawn.
That's the most optimistic I've ever heard you, Richard.
I said perhaps. I didn't I didn't give you odds on that.
So your column this week is titled Hollywood's Last Stand, and you lay out 6 fronts in which this year might mark the beginning of an industry comeback or the final approach into the death spiral. The main one that we've already been talking about, that we will be talking about this year, consolidation, especially since Netflix and Warner Brothers Discovery are now embarking on this 12 to 18 month process of getting this merger through.
12 or 18 months or more. The Warner's last deal took, what was it, like 3 years, 2.5? So who knows how long but consolidation is the big thing that of all it's kind of the mother sauce of all the threats that all the other potential death spirals either arise from consolidation or are hypercharged by it. And the prospect of losing one studio.
Especially such a storied studio at that.
Yeah, I mean, what's left, they're all kind of storied at this point, but having one of them go away and one less buyer, one less bidder, one less person making movies and one less consumer option really presents the specter of things shutting down really quickly.
So what's the potential here for the proverbial phoenix to rise from the ashes from this front? Because by most accounts, consolidation only ever leads to less. It leads to more layoffs. It leads to less being made. How could this be any kind of positive inflection point?
Well, I don't think any good will come from consolidation happening. My ray of hope is that it can be stopped. And that maybe Donald Trump and Brendan Carr aren't the only and final words on this, that everyone seems to be just assuming like, well, if they want it, it's got to happen. But there's great potential for backlash here. There's backlash brewing against the tech industry, against mergers, against consolidation, against the way the economy is being swallowed up by big companies and people being put out of work. And this is the biggest merger on the horizon in America right now. And it is putting itself in the crosshairs for a lot of anger about all these processes. And there's a lot of things that can happen other than Brendan Carr just saying, okay, goodbye us. There's state attorney generals that can get involved. There's Congress can get involved. And there's opposition brewing both on the left and the right to this. There's a lot of sort of anti-tech sentiment in the Republican Party prior to Trump deciding they were his best friends. So this is not a done deal yet.
Well, would love to end this on a more optimistic note. Richard, do you have any words of wisdom for the industry?
Yeah, the public attention is the big cure and the big hope for all these problems. And we have a lot of things that developed because nobody was paying attention and nobody cared, and everybody just shrugged and sneered and said, it's show business, not show friends, and wrote off the idea of making a difference and this meaning something. And paying attention to what people do and speaking out about it is the cure to a lot of that. And we saw with the Jimmy Kimmel firing, when people speak out, it can move mountains.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, Richard. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much to Richard Rushfield. This has been Ankler Agenda. I'm Elaine Low with Sean McNulty of The Wake Up and Natalie Jarvey of Like and Subscribe. Special thanks to our Gen Z correspondent and author of the Crowd Pleaser newsletter, Matthew Frank. We'll see you all next week.